Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode today. It is titled Be the Change That You Want to See. How are you today, Sophie?
Hi, Raquel. I'm really good. This episode was a little bit of a on-the-cuff one. We started having a conversation about this topic, and as we often do now, we're like, quick, we better make an episode about this because it's something that comes up a lot, and there's not a single person who doesn't experience this from some perspective in the equine community.
Yeah, and I think, from a postural perspective, it's like what we see in the equine functional posture course, what I've seen with equine science students, and lots of people that I've taught, like in the equinology bodywork course that I teach. As we learn more, our perspectives change, and that can be our perspective of what we have done in the past and how we've treated horses in the past. I'm guilty of, many times, especially as a teenager, where the way that I treated my horses I would not see as appropriate today. And reflection on that can be really difficult because you can have a lot of emotion surrounding that in terms of your lack of ability to recognize and your expectations of the horse at that time. But we also, there's a big shift in the industry at the moment, like recently, in terms of our level of awareness of, obviously with us, we're focused on posture and people's awareness around contributions to horses' posture and how that affects the horse's welfare. But there's a lot of awareness increasing around horse welfare and the way that we've always done things. And whether it's actually acceptable. There's a lot of opinions and some are very strong, and there's also people can be very mean in the way that the way that they kind of approach this. And so we wanted to have a discussion about it because I think it is important for us to be able to move forward in terms of helping the horse, and that's our whole aim is to, create awareness to help the horse and create curiosity and questioning to make the world a better place. And just because we've done something a certain way does not mean that it's right. And I'm sure we'll all look back in 10 years' time and go, geez, I could have done that better. Gee, I can't believe I was still riding my horse then. Like, who knows what it will be? Like, can't believe I thought that was okay.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
it's definitely a space that needs to be discussed, I think.
Yeah, coming into that, I mean, we'll go into all the topics, especially talking about emotion and how we want to be in the world in relation to other people on these topics. But the experience that you have as you move through your journey, we're talking about in the context of postural. So, with the reason this came up is because people ask questions. We have, Q&As, and there's a lot of engagement from the participants of the course asking, I'm seeing changes. This is like the question that a lot of people ask. I'm seeing changes in a social setting. For example, I've gone to a competition and I'm seeing horses with poor posture, and I believe that seeing that is maybe causing me distress. And, there's big feelings to manage. My experience in that space has now changed. And there's a lot of underlying factors that just come into play. I mean, the experience you're having influences what you're going to do with your horse. It experiences how you feel in a space in relation to other people. Things come up, everything from judgment, anger, sadness. So many things come up for us, and you see it pop up on social media. We talked about the fact that there is a lot of overt bullying. There's a lot of condescending behavior, a lot of downright fighting, basically disagreements, particularly on social media. And the increased knowledge that a lot of people have due to access to information, people are putting out content, a lot of different perspectives that are thought-provoking podcasts. Hopefully we're contributing to, people's perceptions or opinions expanding on topics. And also just as a broad thing, the increased knowledge of physical challenges horses are carrying, and their emotional challenges they're having as well. There's definitely been a shift in the last 10 to 20 years that mainstream equestrianism is really talking about the experience of the horse. And so that's, what we're reflecting on is people's, I suppose it all comes down to emotions, emotional engagement with those topics and how we talk about them and engage with each other, human to human, on those topics. Yeah. What about, thinking?
Yeah, I think the challenge there is that a lot of things in the horse world, like a lot of us have been in the horse world for a really long time, right? Like I've been in the horse world since I was a child, and I went to pony club, and did all of the things, and when we're ingrained in the horse world, it becomes our identity. So, like you might be a dressage rider, or you might be in the Western disciplines, or you might be a trail rider, or you might be a working equitation rider, or whatever. And so you feel that that's a part of your identity, and that community, you really want to be a part of that community. And I think, I've had a lot of people where maybe they were competing and they were a judge, and they've said, I can't do it anymore. I see things that I don't agree with. And there are more opinionated people, I guess, that are taking over, and I can't see my ability to create change in that space. And so they've left the space. And sometimes we have to do that for our own personal sanity, and safety. However, if we all leave the space, then the change kind of stops. And I think that it is shifting, less people are leaving the space, I think, and more people are opening up to change, because there's just so many pressures now. Like I think even in the last 12 months to 2 years, the pressures have changed in terms of we need to think more. And like we did the podcast on, what is a happy horse, and like thinking about that. And so I think there are more pressures in general, but we have to think about how we approach that in a way that's going to be positive for the horse industry and not going to create a lot of kind of conflict or people walking away from the sport. Like instead, being able to stay in the discipline and create the change within the discipline. Like I meet a lot of people now, they're half dressed in Western, they're half dressed in dressage, like, they are who they are, and they're doing their best for their horse, and they're finding a place where it's okay to be the advocate for their horse, and it's okay to be who they are for their horse. And I think the biggest thing that I say to people is, like, you are your horse's best advocate. So at the end of the day, no matter what somebody else says to you, you're wrong, or ride your horse harder or put more gear on it, like, you're the best person to advocate for your horse. And you will be right. If you think that there is something wrong with your horse, I have not met an owner yet that was wrong. But they'd been told that they were wrong by numerous people, and often in a very what's the
White
word?
fashion,
Hmm?
like a black and white kind of way.
Yeah, like you're definitely wrong. That horse is putting it over you. You
Yeah.
need to do this. Like just so black and white, without a consideration of other things. So, that's why we have the equine functional posture membership community after people have done level 1 and 2, because we want to foster a community who is about doing the best that they can for their horses, and to be surrounded by other people like what we have in our community is an amazing level of support. I have never so far seen a bullying comment or a harsh comment, or like everyone is so supportive. And I know the group is small and it can change as people come in, but like it is, our membership group that we have is so supportive of each other no matter where they are on their horse journey. Like we have
Yeah.
horse owners, body workers, saddle fitters, hoof care professionals. We have a huge array in that
Yeah.
community of horse experience, and it is so respectful. Like it,
Yeah.
I love how everyone supports each other so much in that community. And I think that we need to foster that more just in the general horse population. So like when you think about that, what do you think we need to think about to like, yeah, just bring this a bit more to the forefront?
I would say that it's very difficult to know. It's very difficult to know the whole story. Like knowing the whole story gives you the perspectives, but there are so many spaces where you only get a glimpse of something that, I mean, the whole tone of this is about judgment, really, and the judgments that we make about certain things that we see, and knowing the whole story, and not just knowing the whole story, but understanding all the perspectives of either all the different environmental, social, financial factors that have gone into a certain event occurring or a situation are what add depth to something and meaning, and it creates, whatever you're seeing and making a judgment about. And it's very rare that we know the whole story.
Yeah.
But when you do know the whole story, often your insights change, and so does your perspective and your judgment, and often your tone. And the other thing that we need to think about are people's values and reflections of people's values, and the things that come up for us as we see those things. What kind of big feelings do you see when you're in a situation and you see something that you would deem as an injustice? So, this is a really emotionally charged topic because people care deeply about their horses.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's such an emotional component, and you want horses to feel good and experience life positively. And when you see things that sometimes conflict with your values, we're going to talk about this towards the end about, how to manage ourselves and our behavior, but understanding your own motivational factors are really, really key. Like, do I feel the need to lash out at this person, comment, to, to say something snide, or to say something in a tone that conveys that I disapprove of what they've said or what they're doing. And that just brings us to something we were talking about before. In the language that we use with people, often when people talk about a topic or they're explaining something and we have a disagreement, when it's important both for it's something that you can only do for yourself, and people have a responsibility on their own to go through the self-reflection process and the journey of learning those skills. But often when you are made wrong or you make someone else wrong, it can be deeply emotional because you feel that it's a personal attack and that it reflects on how you are viewed in the world. That might be, I am smart, or I am stupid, or I am good, or I am bad. And so you see it often come up in social media that somebody who cares deeply about a topic, such as horse welfare, they might put a post up or something like that, and somebody disagrees with them, or tells them that they're doing something wrong, or that their horse is in pain or uncomfortable, or that they should change their tack, their bit, their training style, who they're hanging out with, whatever it is. And that person becomes very defensive, and it feels like we're telling somebody you're a bad person. And for them, who cares so deeply, they're like, how could you possibly say that? I care so much about my horse and I care so much about their well-being, and I'm doing everything that I can and I'm exploring options, and I'm being made, you're telling me that I'm wrong, but usually it's a reflection of how it makes you feel like you're a bad person. And so I've been on the receiving, and I'm sure there's been a time where I've also been the one giving, an opinion, and it's probably hurt somebody's feelings, even if that wasn't my intention. So just something to think about, that our deepest values that we see as unbreakable, sometimes, particularly in communication, it's missed or it's conveyed poorly. And it's just a lot of self-awareness to bring, just to consider the whole perspective. How is that person feeling in the moment? How am I feeling in the moment? And it just comes back to what we were saying about identity, those underlying, I identify as somebody who cares deeply, or I want you to do better. I have expectations of you, and what we're talking about, judgment. And we'll come back to it later, but we do want to touch on the fact that you need to have grace for yourself. And that comes into having grace for other people. But once you come through those things, you want to be asking questions, not making judgments. And that comes back to the discussion we had on respect.
Yeah, I think, that's one thing that I encourage all my clients to do, is ask questions. And, I remember actually Sharon May Davis saying to me that when she was studying, she asked a question, and the lecturer at the time shut her down and said, you don't need to know that. And we should all be able to ask questions. And sometimes I will say, from a now lecturer perspective, that it's very confronting when someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer. Because that is exactly what you were talking about. It's a reflection of me. It's a reflection of how people think about me. And if I don't know, and I'm supposed to be the I'm the lecturer in that situation, or whatever, it's very challenging to then say, I don't know. And I think you actually asked me a lot of questions as a student who put me in that position, where I was like, geez, I don't know, I have to think of something here. And we've had people in the equine functional posture course who've asked questions where I'm like, I don't know. And it takes a lot of self-reflection and awareness to deal with something like that, and I am a person who, now will say, I don't know, but this is a place that I think we could find out, or this is a person who I think we could help us, or I will go away and have a think about this because I can't think about it right now in this moment, because my brain's on another tangent, part of ADHD. But so it's, it is important to ask questions, and it is important that you don't feel minimized in asking those questions. And we really try to promote that in our equine functional posture course as well, that there's no stupid questions, and we empower people to ask those questions. But I also just wanted to kind of go back to knowing the whole story, because I've been called out a lot as a vet and where I made assumptions based on people's appearances or the way they spoke to me, their expectations of me, in terms of, you remember I had one person come in one day and they sat the dog on the table and I said, oh, well, like, what's going on with your dog? So I wanted to get a bit of history. And they said, well, that's your job. You tell me. And I was like, I'm a crap vet. I can't tell them what's wrong with their dog. Like, I don't know. And then at that moment, like such a pivotal moment in my mind, I said, well, we would probably need a bit more information for me to be able to tell you. Like, I might need to do some blood tests or some x-rays or have an assessment of your dog. Like, I can't just look at your dog sitting on the table and tell you what is wrong with it. But the other part of my brain was like, I'm so shit because I can't look at the dog and tell you what is wrong with it. And I think that a lot of us go through that. Like, I've spoken to a lot of people and I've also dealt with a lot of people's perceptions of me, like saying, oh, like you feel that too, like you worry about that too, like because people create perception of you, like that you know all this stuff and you're so amazing, or whatever the perception is. But everyone is a real person who has real experiences, real emotions, real values, and you cannot know by your interaction with somebody what their real story is. And like I said, I've been humbled so many times where I've made an assumption and then I found out more about the story and I'm like, oh, well, like that person is dealing with like all of this stuff that I could not possibly know. And that is why they treated me poorly today. Like, that is why they, that it was so important to them that I saved their animal today, like,
Yeah.
so you will never know the whole story. And I've heard some stories lately from clients where people have been shamed, so people have made assumptions about their horse and they've been taken aside, no, not aside, sorry, they were in front of a group of people, called out as their horse being fat. Okay, I'm not saying the horse was fat or it wasn't fat. That's not the point. But this could happen to anybody. Like your saddle is not fitting, or your noseband is too tight, or whatever, and then they pull you into the center and then they make an example of you and they shame you in front of a group of people. And that is never okay. Like, that is not a learning experience for anybody. What they didn't know about this horse was that it was already on a track system. She was already implementing an exercise plan. The horse had actually improved. Like that person could not possibly know that because they did not ask them, oh, what are you doing? Like, how's your journey going with your horse? What are you actually doing with your horse right now? Like, what's your story? So we really need to be careful when we call people out black and white and then use a method which creates shame in the other person. I don't care how bad it is. I don't care if the horse's mouth is blue. You still need to understand the story. I'm not saying that is okay, but to create change and help that horse, attacking and shaming that person will not create the change. And so we need to think about how they got to that position in the first place before we can even think about how we can help them. And I'm obviously pretty passionate about this.
Well, it's just the understanding that there are multiple perspectives. There are so many things. Everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different as they travel through a journey. And so, your collection of experiences shape how you think about things, how you feel about things. It's the things you've been exposed to. They all count to the contribution of your opinion of a whole situation, and often that becomes reduced to one or two sentences that maybe you put it as a comment on social media, but they've also had the same journey that's different from yours. It's a collection of experiences, opinions, you know, the way they've been conditioned, raised, their environment they're in. And it's not about saying that you're right and they're wrong. And it's not about saying that along the journey that you're coming from a place of righteousness or more seniority in understanding or self-awareness, but just knowing we're all at a different space and or we're at a different place in a journey, and that shaming is never going to get anywhere. And there's quite a lot of research to back that up, particularly Brene Brown is someone we were discussing before. And the reason is that when you shame somebody, it's what we were talking about before. It's quite a deep wound to inflict on somebody, and you don't leave space for vulnerability. And vulnerability allows you to explore and try new things, possibly get it wrong, have it look messy, but be on the way to trying to improve. And if you don't create safe spaces, how is anybody going to change or try new things, whether it's for fun, whether they're trying to do the right thing by the horse, they're curious about new things, or they're just trying to learn, gather perspectives. And I think that really comes, you know, for me, that's looked like doing my best. And I will say this has come as well from you and other, you know, personal journeys that I've been on. When you were able to say, I don't know, in front of me, that carries along in a ripple effect. I know that you went through a harder journey learning how to say, I don't know. I have a much easier time of it because earlier on in my journey, I saw you modeling that behavior. So for me, when people ask me questions, I find it much easier probably than you did to say, I don't know. Why don't we think about this perspective and see if it builds in? Here's where I'm going to start. And talk about the things that you said, and normalizing change as not being, you know, moral. You know, I moved from this perspective. I learned something. I'm implementing something different. Oh, I've had to learn how to emotionally regulate before I can implement patience in my training. You know, those things, they don't have to be moral failings, and it doesn't have to make me better than you, but normalizing that change happens. And it's okay to change. It's okay to leave things behind and try new things in a safe space is, it's very healing, and it leads to positive change, genuine change, you know, social
Yeah.
and cultural. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like you saying then you know, that you have an easier time saying I don't know. I think another part of that is being a vet. You know, I remember being told in, I don't remember what year it was, but I remember being told, you guys are the cream of the crop. The buck stops with you. So, you know, basically you should know, you know, and you're the figure that people are going to come to and ask advice. And so I came through that space where like not knowing was in my mind not okay. You know, and I struggled with that as a vet for 10 years because I remember, you know, being a new grad and thinking, oh my God, I should know that. And like looking back now, it's like, no, I shouldn't have known that. Like I was still developing, I was still gaining experiences, but it was like an expectation that was set on us coming into vet school and throughout vet school that you basically should know and that you are the expert. And I see it, we've talked about, you know, a little bit about vet stuff before, but like it's much more confronting for me to say I don't know because of that expectation that I've come through, and also because of the way that vets still treat people who question, you know, and it happens in the medical profession. I'm not going to go into that, but like there's a lot of places that we are not allowed to question. And the biggest changes that I have seen, and science is questioning, right? At the end of the day, someone came up with a question, they developed a study, and they proved it. There's a shitload of questions that are not answered from a scientific perspective that maybe in 30 years' time we'll go, we know the answer to that now, but it's being able to question. Like it's a very healthy thing to question, and it's a very healthy thing to advocate for yourself and your horse, but it's also, like you said, the recognition of the emotions that can come up with that. And one thing I've had to learn, I will see a post on Facebook and my immediate reaction will be like, rah, like I feel so angry about that. That's really terrible. I can't believe they're doing that. Like it's shit, shouldn't happen, blah, blah. And then I go away. I do not reply to that post. I go away and I decide at what angle can I come at that to actually create some change, like in a positive way without attacking anybody, without shaming people. And so I have made it a mission in my business, especially this business, our podcast and our functional posture course, to portray my opinion in a positive, like I think we've had conversations about this where I've said to you, I don't want to be calling people out on things they're doing wrong. I want to create positive posts, the way that things can do things better for their horses. If there's something that is really wrong, like I don't comment on a lot of things because I would rather create a post that shows a better way. And I think me riding my horse bitless, for example, going to a competition, being the only rider riding bitless at that competition, like I was nervous about people's perceptions, and it was my first competition on jelly and it was my first competition in 2 years, and I didn't, know how it's going to be perceived, right? But I just was like, well, this is what I do and I have my reasons for doing it, and if people want to judge, whatever, if they want to know the whole story, I'm happy to tell them the whole story. But the feedback that I got from that was people are changing because you showed up, because you decided that, and I actually get emotional because I decided to go in a bit less bridle. Other people now are trying it at home and they were like, oh, I was too scared to come, like to try it or to like
Yeah. To
come
have a
out in
go.
front of
Yeah.
people like that.
Yeah.
And if I didn't show up and just went, well, I don't want to be in that environment because it's a competitive environment, there's people who, maybe aren't doing things I agree with, then I wouldn't created that change. So
Yeah.
we can't all just sit back and not put ourselves in that space, but we just have to be okay with putting ourselves in that space. And
Yeah.
if people have things to say about it, it's like, just know that they're coming from their story, they're coming from their perspective, that's their journey, and it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You've come to this place because that's your journey. If they want to know about it, they'll come and ask you. If they want to just post something negative about it, well, that's their shit. It's
Yeah.
not yours.
Yeah.
So yeah, that
Definitely.
was like, I think we do need to get out there and we can't all hide away in order to create change.
Definitely. And I mean, we spoke before about the fact that when people make judgments about you, they're judging you on something that they are judging themselves on as well. So, if they're noticing particular things, they're also usually speaking to themselves in that tone, or, that level of judgment they hold for you is something they also hold for themselves. And so when, just normalizing getting out there and being okay with not being perfect, being, in the process of changing, of learning, modeling, it's modeling. We're social learners, trying new things. It's healthy.
I think we're doing the podcast for ourselves. It's like
Just championing ourselves.
yeah, messages to remind us, because as we also develop a bigger following and a bigger space, it's freaking scary to put yourself out there and to put yourself up for criticism. Because I had a thought the other day, I've been very lucky, like I haven't had a whole lot of criticism and stuff, and I think that's because I've really you know, we work a lot on our self-awareness. We do a lot of like
Personal development.
self-development like that.
Yeah.
We've both been through journeys like that, and that's very important to both of us. But I had a recognition the other day. I was like, I'm getting a lot more followers on, you know, we're probably getting followers on this podcast, followers on Facebook that do not know me from a bar of soap, right? And so of course there's gonna, at some point, you know, there's gonna be criticism. And I was like, oh, like that's really uncomfortable for me. I really hate conflict. Like I really don't want to be in that space. But I'm like, but if I want to continue to create change, I have to stand up and continue to be true to that. Otherwise, there is, you know, I'm not going to create the change that I want to create.
Yeah.
But it's extremely confronting when you get to that position where you realize like there's going to be people coming in who, yeah, have no, you're just another person behind a computer screen. Like there's no personal context to that. And I think that's what we have to think about when we're looking at images or videos or going to competitions or whatever, that like each person is a person. Like
Yeah.
regardless of what they do, what they say, they're still a person who has had their own journey to get to that point. They have their own challenges and values and perspectives, and it's always important, like when I'm angry or, you know, think that I don't agree with something, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I could see it from a different perspective here. And
Yeah.
I was saying to Sophie, like my husband gets a bit frustrated with me, and because I'm always the person in my family who sees it from a different perspective. Like I feel like it's part of my life calling to see things from a different perspective. And when I would say to him, you know, like he'd be annoyed about something or someone, and I'm like, but what about their story? Like maybe they just had a bad day and you know, you just got the bad bit of it, or maybe you know, there's another side to the story. And he'd be like, you're taking sides, like why don't you stick up for me? And I'm like, it's not about sticking up for you, it's about that there's so many sides to the story that you're just seeing your perspective and you think you're right. But
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that maybe something shit happened to them that day. And he has had a few experiences now where he's found out a bit more information and gone,
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't have, I realized I was wrong in what I thought there, that
Yeah.
the story I had in my mind was not that story. And I think that that happens a lot in the horse world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we also talked about the point that, you know, as we've both done a similar course, a transformational coaching program by a guy called Jim Fortin, and in it, when people bring up things that trigger them, they've been coached to say to themselves, when have I done something
Yeah.
that could be similar to this person? You know, someone's made a judgment about me. When was the last time I judged somebody? When was the last time that I did something that could be perceived? And I know in myself, sometimes I've been annoyed when I feel like someone's done the wrong thing by me. And then I think, when was the last time that I maybe did something that wasn't, you know, that they could have thought was the wrong thing by them? And that self-reflection gives me more grace for myself, more grace for them. And just, yeah, it comes back to the fact that we're all people. And this isn't to say that, you know, making criticisms, there are places where pressure on the industry has made change.
Yeah.
You know, there's times when, you know, social calling out of inappropriate behavior has created legislation change, social change, you know, things that have improved welfare for the horse. And we're just talking about the fact that there are multiple perspectives here, because people are individuals and we don't want to become bullies, but we want to create change. And so creating safe spaces that are, we're talking about vulnerability, where people can change and try new things, on an individual level, you know, at your pony club level, at the next time you see people in an arena, you know, those, because it's nice to consider great big social collectives and point out in industry, generalized industry issues that we see as like an overarching problem, but generally person to person, like interpersonal connections and interpersonal experiences that we have with one another determine the change that we make, the things we learn, and you know that those little connections determine the experience that we have of life. You know, it's not just a big picture question. It comes down to the, you know, the one interaction you have with another person, whether that's on social media or in person, and those little connections make up the journey of your life. So trying to use those little moments. I mean, we did come up with 7 tips about how to create change. Should we talk about those?
Yeah. So, yeah, the first one was identify. So identifying your beliefs and mindset contribution. So whether they're positive or negative, you know, whether your belief about that thing is positive or negative. And I would also say in that, oh, I just forgot my, I had a really important point there. Anyway, identify your belief and that's what I was going to say. So generally when I feel a stronger emotion about something, it means there's a deeper thing I need to learn from that, you know. So the stronger emotion I feel about someone or something, like whether, you know, it's a horse related thing, obviously, then I will reflect and go, whoa, that's a strong emotion. Like, I wonder why that's evoked such a strong emotion in me, and I won't respond. Obviously, it's always different with your closest loved ones, but like in a social setting, you know, I won't respond to that until I understand why it evoked such a strong emotion in me. Like, why did that make me so angry or so sad or so passionate? And there's usually a deeper story, you know, for me to understand within my life. Like, I might have had something similar happen where I felt it was unjust or unfair, or they were being mean or whatever. So until I figure that out, then the best place to respond to that is after you've identified your beliefs, your emotions, your values around that, and the emotion is not there so much anymore. So you're not responding from the place of emotion. Like you talked about how pressure has created change. That pressure was not from a place of emotion. It was from a place of, you know, creating change, improving the welfare of the horse. And it came from a very positive place to, you know, and a place of like, well, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to create the change? But it didn't come of a place of like, you're wrong, I'm angry, you know. There's no emotional words in that space, especially when it comes to changing legislation. And I've been involved in that as well, changing legislations. And yeah, it's important that you are, by the time you respond to something or even read something like feedback, it's important that you read the feedback, you go away and you process it. You think about the emotions it's evoked in you, and then you come back with a response. Like some people say, write the email, don't send it, go away, think about it. You might not need to write the email anymore because you've come up with a different perspective. So identifying that's really important. What's the next one?
So the next one we talked about is courage. And that ties in a little bit to identifying big feelings, particularly because we do have responsibility to self-reflect, and that can take a lot of courage because sometimes it's uncomfortable, and for multiple different reasons. One, because we might decide that our opinion has changed, and that can be uncomfortable as well. Courage to then, you know, to make change yourself, or the courage to, you know, do all kinds of things. That might be everything from make an apology you know, there's just so much courage tied up in change because, you know, it comes back to talking about vulnerability. It can be a scary place to, and to be vulnerable often means that you're in a space where somebody could use something against you. You know,
Yeah.
you've shown something that's often perceived as a weakness or a point that, you know, I care so deeply about this. You could use that against me and I could be hurt. And in safe spaces, that's where you often show your vulnerability and you can make changes and not build up walls, but you usually create a sense of self that makes you more robust to you know, things that might hurt you, even though you haven't actually changed. You know, you usually become a bit stronger in the face of possible criticisms, even though you're, you know, the things that way you feel hasn't actually changed. So courage, what else?
Yeah, gratitude. So being able to see things in a different light. So gratitude is for your own journey, um, and you know how far you've come and how far you've developed in your ability to see and feel things, and you know having that gratitude even that you're now able to help your horse in a different way and recognize things in a different way rather than sitting in the space of like, I was a bad person, I've done everything wrong in the past. Like just being grateful that you have actually got into a better space now and you are trying to do things better, and also being grateful for learning opportunities where you see things that, you know, you see the horses that are maybe lame at the competition, you know, that you can recognize it, you know, that you now have a different power of observation. You now have a different thought process, a different understanding. And so, you know, rather than getting frustrated that they don't know, just being grateful, well, that you do, and that you've seen things done in a different way, rather than needing to go up and tell them that they're wrong and that you know a better way and that they should be doing it like this. You know, just being able to go, well, I would do that differently. If they want to ask me my opinion, I'm happy to share, because that's also a big thing for me too, is like, I won't go and share my opinion if someone is not happy to
Receive
ask
it?
me because, or receive it, because I'm sure I've done that at some point in the past, but it usually just creates a bad experience for me and a lot of stress for me. And there's been times where I wish I had said something, but I still think that if you say something when it's not invited, you're not going to create that change that you want to create. Like usually you're met with resistance. So I will plant seeds if people want to know, but that's it. Then it's
Yeah.
their journey. So really being grateful that you you are in that place of learning, you are in that place of developing your knowledge, and that you would do things differently now than you did before. What's the
Yeah.
next one?
So, well, actually, just touching this one touches back on vulnerability, and that is coming from the perspective that asking for help is not a weakness, and staying open with the understanding that sometimes you don't always get help in exactly the way that you want it the first time around. And that's okay too. You know, sometimes you ask a question in a space where it wasn't quite as safe as you thought it was, or you didn't really get the help that you wanted when you asked a question. And understanding that that's all just part of the journey and it's not a reflection of you being stupid or bad, and that maybe you need to ask in a different space, or you've learned how to read whether a space is right for you, or you know, you're going to go and ask a different question, and just understand that all the experiences that you have are leading you forward in the direction that you are trying to get to, and being vulnerable in that space asking for help is a great place to create change.
Yeah, it's a hard space to be sometimes.
A hard space to be.
I can wholly relate to the
Do.
vulnerability aspect because I find that very, very challenging in my life.
Yeah.
So the next one is intent. And, you know, from an intent perspective, it's like when you read something, when you listen to something, when you observe something, like assume that, you know, there was a positive intent behind it. Like I read a lot of comments on Facebook. I don't often comment, but I do read a lot of things, and I also see how comments are taken in a negative way where I'm like, I don't think that person meant that, but it's just the way that it's been taken. So I guess assume that, you know, it's being portrayed in a positive way, like it's intended to have a positive effect, and just some people are not as able to communicate that, which Sophie will talk about as our next point. But yeah, I guess assuming that intent is from a good place, and that you don't always just jump straight to reading something and thinking that they're attacking you, or that they're attacking whatever it might be that's open for discussion. You know, that's it's your portrayal of what's being written or said or you see, but it's also the person who's written it, showed it. It's also their way that they portrayed it too. So it's like there's two swords within that.
Yeah. It just comes back to the multiple perspectives. So the next one, this is a big one because it's how we relate to each other, but communication. So that comes back to being respectful, having an awareness of perspectives, like what you were just saying. There's so many different things that go into the way that we communicate, and have humility along the way. It also ties into what we're saying about courage and the responsibility to find and develop the potential of yourself and others, in the fact that our language and the way that we communicate is a real skill. So being mindful of the language which we use and how we create safe spaces for communication conveys, you know, putting the effort in to learn that communication. It's a depth of care and respect and love for other human beings and the way that we want to treat them, but being mindful that it's a skill, and to be, you know, the topic of this being the change that you want to see, it's not just that we need to be better horse people or we need to be better emotionally regulated. You know, there are other hard and soft skills as well that come into that. And in relation to other people, communication is one of them. And the language that you might use, such as being curious rather than being judgmental, and using soft words rather than hard ones, and asking questions, or even just interpersonal skills like adding some, to be honest, some happy emojis sometimes goes a long way as well. Smiley face. And so communication, you know, that examples of that might be, like we were just saying, being inclusive when people ask for help, you know, what we were just saying, when recognizing that either they're asking for help, how am I going to respond to this person? And also what you were saying about planting seeds. You know, communication isn't just about being right, and understanding that sometimes, like with horses, it's more, you know, there's that saying, they don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel. And that's a really big deal, because, you know, just the arch of the whole topic, vulnerability, safe spaces, how do you feel when we're speaking, and are you likely to come back to me, and is this a space you really want to be in, am I fostering that? And that also comes down to other things, creating change, you know, setting boundaries as well in your communication. It's important that you look after yourself as well, in spaces, and it also ties into, I'll go into that in the next point. Do you want to finish off the tips before I go on a tangent?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in terms of language and communication, like a good author to follow is Brene Brown, because she has done numerous books about the language that we use and the meaning of different like words of emotion. And even that, you know, sometimes we'll feel something, but it means something else kind of thing. Like, so having a bit more of an understanding about the power of language and emotions can be really useful in the way that you communicate. And gosh, like, you know, I've definitely been guilty of communicating very bluntly at times, and I'm not very fluffy often, but I, you know, am trying to come from a good place of caring about the horse and the person. But I've also planted seeds, you know, where I've the person has been very resistant to whatever I've said, and I just have let it go and like thought, well, it's not my responsibility to create that change. Like but I've planted a seed. And sometimes it's the next person who comes along that makes that seed grow. And that's okay. Like that it, you know, being okay with that and going, well, they didn't listen to me. I told them that 10,000 times. And why'd they listen to them? It's like, well, it doesn't matter because they listen to somebody. So sometimes you're just the person who plants the seed and there's somebody else who comes along and creates the change. So don't feel like that was a failure on your part. Like planting seeds, sometimes it takes years for people to like water that little seed and grow. But the fact that they found that change even after 1 to 2 years is still a really good place, because
Yeah,
some people go their whole lifetime and never water the seed. So just being aware of
absolutely.
that. And now just being the best that you can be. Like that's, you know, be kind to yourself. There's always another way. Like your way is never the only way. There's always another way to do things. There is a worse way, there's a better way, there's, you know, maybe just a better way for you and your horse that's, you know, better for you, but for another person it is not the right way for them. And I deal with that with clients a lot, you know, like in rehab there's like a golden path where you're like, well, this would be the best way that we could progress, so we could do all of these things. And then there's reality, you know, where in rehab you might choose, then one person might be able to do 3 of these things and one person might be able to do 2 of these things, and it's like maybe it's not, you know, maybe it could be better, but it's the best that those people can do with that horse in that environment. And so, you know, being mindful that everyone is generally doing the best that they can, based on where they're at in that moment. And I think the older you get, the more aware you become of life's challenges and how, you know, there's a lot of people that are really doing amazing and you don't know how much they're kind of fighting behind the scenes and they're paddling under that water. So just being really mindful of that.
Definitely. And I just wanted to add as a little bonus tip is the fact that sometimes the value of maintaining your own peace has to be very important. That's because um, it's really important for you to be able to be at peace. And sometimes that includes accepting that some people won't change, even
Yeah,
if
being
you,
okay with walking away.
yeah, even if you have a strong desire to change somebody else and you're doing all the things that we've talked about or more than, and you're modeling and you're opening conversations kindly, you know, everybody's is on their own journey, and you being able to manage your own emotions means that you have a better opportunity to serve the people who are waiting for you, and that you aren't going to burn out because your experience is also important.
Yep, and I've been there, you know, where I've burnt out because I cared so much about my clients and my responsibilities and everything. And yeah, it didn't serve me because I couldn't keep serving at that point. So it is really important to recognize you can only do what you can do and your peace is paramount. And sometimes you do have to walk away and be okay with that, you know. And also what you said about regulating your own emotions, everything, your horse will thank you. Like you learn to recognize your emotions a bit more. Like it'll change the posture in your horse because the way that you interact with your horse will change. Like all the stuff that we've said today, we've talked about people, but you take all of this stuff and apply it to your horse.
Yeah.
You will also help your horse to embrace the change, and they'll actually probably be more receptive than all the people. But it is amazing how when you change those things within yourself, and really look at this within yourself, how it changes things around you, and especially your horses. So just
Yeah.
be really mindful of that.
Yeah. I'm just very quickly going to plug the fact that there is just because it particularly helped me, and I know it's helped you in the context of people who want to improve their emotional regulation, who want to improve how they manage themselves. There is somebody called Jim Fortin, and he has a podcast called Transform Your Life from the Inside Out. It has fantastic topics in there if you go back to the start, and he also has a coaching program. And I'm just bringing that up because it probably is one of the greatest things that has changed my life, and it's influenced my ability to maintain my own peace. It's influenced my relationships, my health, my life, my ability to have grace for myself with my horse journey in particular. That caused me a lot of stress, and now it doesn't.
Yeah,
So if
I would
anybody,
agree.
yeah,
I would agree with that. Like, yeah, it's very valuable in allowing you to see things from a very different perspective. So yeah, totally agree with that, and we have no affiliation in supporting that. So we've just both benefited from his learning. So awesome. Well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vanderberg in today's podcast. I hope you've found it very insightful. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can share more valuable insights. The next level 1 equine functional posture course is on the 17th of February 2025. Click the link in the episode notes to learn more about the course.
we'll see you in the next exciting episode.